The objective here today is to talk about federal public key infrastructure. We're going to use a government website to do that, idmanagement.gov. And you follow the forward slashes till you get to FPKI. FPKI is a program that provides the government with a trust framework and infrastructure to administer digital certificates and public-private key pairs. So the question is, what is FPKI administering? And the answer is digital certificates and these public-private key pairs. And if you're unfamiliar with this, that's why you've tuned into this video in the first place, I assume. So it looks like they have 6 sections for us to read through. We're going to skip the auditing information part here and just start with the Federal Trust Framework. FPKI is a network of hundreds of certificate authorities that issue PIV credentials and person identity certificates, PIV interoperable credentials and person identity certificates, other person identity certificates, and then enterprise device identity certificates. The participating CAs and the policies, processes, and auditing of all the participants are referred to as the Federal Public Key Infrastructure. So that's what makes up this infrastructure. So my question is, what exactly makes up the infrastructure referenced to by FPKI? What's the I part of this acronym? And the answer is there's 4 parts here: the participating certificate authorities, the policies, the processes, and then the resulting auditing of all the participants, that is, all these CAs. The FPKI includes U.S., federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, international governments, and commercial organizations that work together to provide services for the benefit of the federal government. Alright, so certificate policies. Now we're given our previous acronym steroids, so it's even larger here. So FPKI Policy Authority maintains 2 certificate policies to which all CAs map their policies. So the question could be real simple here. What are the 2 policies involved? So you got your X509 certificate policy. We can click on those later, but for the sake of this video, let's keep rolling. So the document below contains a certificate and certificate revocation list, CRL, extensions and profiles for the X509 certificate policy for the U.S. Federal PKI Common Policy Framework. Reading X509 just reminds me of Weapon X from X-Men. And look at that, he looks so cyborgish here, which is apropos to making a tech video like this. And I really want to click this link and start going through the PDF, but I'll save it for another video. Let's move on. To operate a certificate authority used in the federal government and that contains federal data requires the application of NIST Special Publication. And there's some numbers for you. These numbers are relating to security controls. The following document contains the additional security controls that all CPSs, that is, certificate practice statements, must address. Review the control overlay document to understand the requirements and details of each applicable control. Alright, my big takeaway from this section though is that we have an X509 certificate policy, and then we have this common policy framework, certificate policy change proposals. That kind of makes me think of RFCs. So if I'm zeroing in here though, studying for something like the Security Plus, maybe I'm just focusing on this X509. We have Federal Bridge Certificate Policy and Profiles, so that's X509 Certificate Policy for the Federal Bridge Certification Authority. And then there's a Federal Bridge Certificate Authority, Certificate Policy, Change and Proposals, so just like above actually. And then this document, the documents below contain the certificate and CRL extension profiles for the X509 certificate policy for the FBCA. What is FBCA? There we go. Federal Bridge Certification Authority. So many acronyms. There's this FPKI Key Recovery Policy. It supplements the FPKI certificate policies and describes the procedural and technical security controls needed to operate a key recovery system. Oh, KRS-One is one of my favorite rappers. So there's my question. What document covers the procedural and technical security controls needed to operate KRS, and then your answer could just be like an FPKI key recovery policy is the document that covers these security controls that you need in order to operate this key recovery system. Now, in terms of details about certification authorities, the FPKI Management Authority operates the primary certification authorities that serve as the trust infrastructure for the federal government. So, U.S. Federal Common Policy Certificate Authority, this system operates as the root CA for the federal government's PKI services and is audited to the X509 policy for the U.S. Federal PKI Common Policy Framework. Alright, this website is not as helpful as I had hoped. It's really just covering acronyms after acronyms to a very frustrating level. So let's wrap this video up before we go crazy. The last part is all about personal identity verification, the guidance for which is right here with this link. They say that the federal government uses PIV, personal identity verification, and CAC credentials to identify employees and contractors affiliated with agencies. All PIV and CAC credentials are issued with the same processes and technology to provide a common baseline for authenticating to government networks, accessing government facilities, and authenticating to cross-government applications. These credentials conform to both the NIST standards and the FPKI certificate policies. Your personal identity verification and CAC credentials assert minimum suitability assurance. So I think they're saying here they're going to do an investigation to make sure you are who you say you are, or your company is who they say they are, before you get a certificate in order to access government networks. These credentials were defined by the federal government to be issued to affiliates that are not employees and contractors, but who may require access to limited government systems. PIV interoperable credentials do not assert any suitability assurance. So it's all about just identification, not whether that identity is suitable to be accessing whatever government networks they're referring to here. 3 offices within General Service Administration maintain and govern certificate policies. So you have your Federal Acquisition Service Office, which is responsible for operating the Federal Bridge and Federal Route Certificate Authorities. You have the Office of Government-Wide Policy Co-Chairs. If we refer to these guys as their acronyms, we could say these guys are the FP KEMAs, or FP KEMA, and this is FP KEPA, and this is OCO. OCO is responsible for security and compliance validation and performs vulnerability scans and penetration testing. Oh, that sounds cool. Let's follow that link real quick. GSA.gov, and this is the Office of the Chief Information Officer. It doesn't say a lot. You can pause if you'd like. But I want to wrap up this video. We have several PDFs to read here in the future, so I'm just going to chop it up, make this short. To review what we've studied, there is something called FPKI, Federal Public Key Infrastructure, administering 2 types of things. We learned exactly what infrastructure is. There are 2 policies involved, and if we scroll through, they just kept breaking those 2 types of policies up in each section. So down here was certificate policies, and then there's those 2. Over here is the Federal Bridge certificate policy and profiles, and so there's those 2 again. I guess they just like distinguishing between X509 and then the idea that you have like this general policy. Well, we'll see when we start reading. And our last takeaway, especially in terms of vocabulary, would be X509 is the document that's connected to a public key infrastructure, and then KRS, a key recovery, what was that, system or service? Yeah, there we go, system. And I'm excited to be reading about that in another video.